Hi, I'm Murphy. This is my channel, Murphy's Every Whim, and I'm here to talk about books because I love to talk about books, and YouTube is my only book outlet. That's actually a little bit of a lie. I talk to my sister about books as well, but my sister isn't always available to talk about books. She lives in Alaska, and I live in Iowa. And not only does she live in Alaska, she lives in remote areas of Alaska. And so I don't always get to talk to her. But it is because she lives in Alaska that has prompted my choices for what I'm going to talk about today. It's 85 degrees out, it's afternoon. HWC is on an errand, so we'll see if we can get a video done. I also have written a script, which is unusual for me, and so we'll see how many words are in that script and how long it takes me to film the video to give me a good idea of basically how much content I can put into the amount of time I want to spend on a video. So I've spent a lot of time on BookTube talking about book hauls and my current reading, but I thought I would do something a little different today, and that is to look at recommending 3 books that I think are worth reading. And today I'm talking about women in Alaska. And the timeline for when these women lived are early 20th century, the 1900s, till just after World War II. And so they all fit in approximately that same time period, but not exactly. And I will try to include maps and pictures in the video, some pictures that I've taken, some maps that are open domain, or maybe I'll take some maps from the books themselves that could help you know the scope of where it was these women lived, where they traveled, and that sort of thing. The first book I want to talk about is The Road North, One Woman's Adventure Driving the Alaska Highway, 1947 to 1948, by Iris Woolcock. And the book is written by Iris Woolcock in a way because of the 120,000 words that she wrote about this trip. They've been edited down to the size of this book. So the Alaska Highway was built in 1942 because Alaska is the closest part of the U.S. It was a territory then, but the closest part of the U.S. to Japan. And so World War II, there was worry that Japan would actually attack. Japan would actually attack Alaska, and they did. And that's what one of the books that I'm going to talk about is about. But this book is about Iris Woolcock, who was a photographer, and in 1945 she bought a trailer and a World War II Jeep and loaded it up with 23 inner tubes, 11 spare tires, an electric generator, 4 spare axles, supplies, and a complete photographic darkroom. So she loaded up this trailer, and the trailer weighed 16,000 pounds. So we're talking 8 tons here. And she and her cat jumped into her World War II Jeep, hauled the trailer to Alaska. And this took her, the whole trip was 12,000 miles, and it took her 2 years. And so she's traveling on a road that's only been open for 5 years in the wilderness. And this is a highway that back then was known for mud, potholes, sub-zero temperatures, and 27-degree grades. Now, if you've ever driven, say, well, I don't know, I-40 through the Appalachians, you know what a 7% grade is. So just think about what a 27% grade is for not only a trailer, but this was the infancy of travel trailer construction. And so they had not worked out the kinks. So one reason this trailer weighed as heavy as it did was because it was poorly designed. And one reason that she needed to take extra axles was because of the poor design. So like I said, this book is an edited version of her notes and 500 pictures, 500 photos that she took were donated to a museum in Alaska. I don't remember. I think it was in Anchorage. And that's where this information was taken to comprise this book. And so in the book, she talks about trailer construction, and in my script, I worded it as she works with the manufacturer, but she actually complained to the manufacturer and was very vocal about what was bad about trailer construction. So actually she did help improve trailer construction, much to the chagrin of the trailer manufacturers. And she's vocal about everything, and she doesn't mince her words. But in addition to her opinions and her travel and all the problems that she had along the way, her photography and stories tell the lives of everyday people who were living in the frontier. I've driven to Alaska on the Alaska Highway many times, mostly by myself. And I'm thankful that this is a paved highway, that there are traveler services, regular intervals. I've never had to worry about running out of gas or not being able to find a place to stay or a place to get a meal if I needed it. And so I just think about what she had to do along the highway. And actually, as much as I'm glad that it's such a nice highway to drive now, I miss that romantic aspect of worrying about what was happening around the bend, worrying about whether I have enough tires with me. And I usually took about 3 spare tires with me, not the 11 that she took. And the 11 that she took were not enough. I've never had a blowout on any of the highways I've driven in Alaska. So I'm thankful for that. But I miss that romance, and I miss the slow pace of travel that causes you to have to stop at roadhouses and talk to local people. That's something that I miss that Iris Woolcock actually talks about in her book. All right. The next book is Searching for Fannie Quigley, a wilderness life in the shadow of Mount McKinley. And this was written by Jane Haigh in 2000. And the book is as much about Jane Haigh's struggle to separate fiction from folklore, fiction from legend, as it was the life of Fannie Quigley. But Fannie Quigley was born in 1871 in Nebraska. And when she was 16 years old, she left home and headed west. She just started following the railroad right-of-way. And so that was at 16. At 27, she followed the gold rush to the Klondike. And what she would do is she would hike into new claims, hike into an area of new gold claims, and set up a kitchen. And, so she hiked in with her stove and everything, and she'd set up a kitchen and sell meals to the miners. And she did this for a long time. That was in, actually, I can't remember when that was. She was born in 1871, so she was 27 she went there, so that was in 1898. And so she did this for a while. While she was there, she married Angus McKenzie, and they ran a roadhouse for a while with Fannie Quigley was cooking. And they were both drinkers. They had a lot of fights. In fact, Fannie had an alcohol problem for all of her life. But she left him, and she traveled or hiked the 800 miles from the Yukon down the Yukon River to Rampart, Alaska, which is it's a place right on the Yukon River, just upstream for where my sister's summer camp is. And so she hiked that 800 miles. Then there was a gold strike in Tanana, which is down the Yukon River, and that's a town where actually my sister is right now in a cabin that she has there. And then she ended up going down up the Tanana River and up the Chena River to the town of Chena. And so she's traveling around, and I'll try to show a map to show what kind of distance this is. And then in 1906, she headed out to Kantishna, and there were gold claims there. And those gold claims were discovered by Joe Quigley and others. So in 1906, she went to this place. And it was here that Fannie started mining on her own. Up until this time, she's just been providing services to people, food and drink at various gold camps. But here she actually started mining. And she and Joe Quigley married in 1918, but he left her in 1937. But she continued to live in the Kantishna area, which is now a part of at that time, part of Mount McKinley Park, which is now Denali, as it should be named. But while she was there, she lived, she homesteaded, she mined, she hunted caribou and sheep and moose. She trapped fox and lynx and wolverine and wolves. She was famous for her cooking. People would come and stop by and have her cooking. She was very famous for her flaky pie crusts, which were made from rendered bear fat that she had, or rendered bear lard that she had rendered on her own, I guess. And but she also grew incredible gardens, which, if you've ever been to Denali Park, just think about the area that's around there that you're driving through as you go, to the end of the trail on the bus, and what that's like. And think about being able to garden in that area. And she had these fabulous vegetable and flower gardens. And so she lived in that Kantishna mining district until 1944, when she died at the age of 74. The book, Searching for Fannie Quigley, like I said, is as much about Fannie as it is about trying to get legitimate information and not just folklore or myths or legends. And Jane Haigh tried to cover the same ground that Fannie Quigley did, trying to find the original claims that she mined, trying to find where she lived, trying to see what life was like in the place, in this area, the Kantishna mining area. And this book is a great look at the lives of women pioneers in the 20th century, because there were pioneers in the 20th century. My sister and I did a little of our own of searching for Fannie Quigley, and we found her gravestone at the Birch Hill Cemetery in Fairbanks. And that was a really powerful experience for me, knowing I was looking at the grave of such a strong and determined woman. The last book I want to talk about is also about a pioneer who went to Alaska, but she went to Alaska after she was 43. This is Last Letters from Attu, the true story of Etta Jones, Alaska pioneer and Japanese POW. And this is by Mary Breu, and it was published in 2009. If you've ever read A Town Called Alice by Neville Shute or seen the movie Paradise Road, you know what the stories of the fate of the women and children, the civilians that were captured by the Japanese and put into Japanese POW camps. You know what their fate was. One was they were just sort of forgotten, not really, and yeah, so, and that was the fate of Etta Jones. So at 43 years of age, Etta Jones went to Alaska to find adventure. What she found was work as a school teacher in remote villages, and she also married a man, Charles Foster Jones, and they worked together. They were both employees of the Alaska Indian Service, which is what it was called, and they spent 17 years moving around from place to place, remote villages, and Etta would teach school. Charles would help in the running of the school, but then Charles also worked for the Weather Bureau and would radio in weather forecasts or weather conditions. And in the early 40s, they decided to go for one more position, and they volunteered for an assignment on the island of Attu. And I'll show you a map to show you how remote Attu is. But so while they were there, the Japanese did attack. They occupied the islands of Attu and Kiska. And when the Japanese occupied these islands, they gathered up all the civilians. That includes the Joneses and all of the native Alaskans who were on these islands. And they shipped them to Japan and put them in POW camps. And in fact, no one knew what happened to all of these people. There was no way to get information off the island to say they'd been captured by the Japanese. And so they were considered lost. And so Etta Jones became a POW in compounds, a couple of compounds near Yokohama, Japan. She and the Australian nurses that she was housed with or imprisoned with, I should say, were rescued and released in 1945. And then she lived in the U.S. and Australia until she died, and I couldn't find the date of her death. After she got back to the U.S., she was happy to talk about her time in Alaska, but she never talked about her time in Japan. The book is written by Etta Jones's grandniece, and she based the book on Jones's letters, a memoir that Jones had written, and then to get the story of what happened in Japan, she interviewed and got letters from the Australian nurses that Etta was imprisoned with. And so the book tells the story of 20 years of Etta living in Alaska, as well as what her experiences were in the Japanese POW camp. So there's really two parts of the book. The book has some flaws. Critics complain that it rambled in some places, that it lacks documentation of the resources, but it's still worth the read. There are stories in there about life in remote villages in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and that in itself is an interesting read. These villages still exist. Tanana is still a village. It's still the only way to get into Tanana is either by plane, boat, or an ice bridge in the winter when the Yukon freezes over. So you can't just decide to drive to Tanana right this minute. Because I'm pretty sure the ice has gone out on the Yukon. But it's worth a read about the villages, about their life in villages, about their life learning to learn the culture of the Native Alaskans, and then also for the stories of life as a civilian Japanese POW during World War II. So those are the 3 books, all about very strong women, strong, in various ways. Iris Woolcock, because she just decided to go to Alaska and travel this road by herself, well, with a cat, on her own at a time when there weren't that many women on their own on the road, on the Alaska Highway. Fannie Quigley, who decided to go to Alaska to make money off of the gold rush and ended up living the rest of her life there. And Etta Jones, who just decided to have some adventure and spent the 20 years in Alaska, and unfortunately had some adventures that she hadn't counted on. So these are 3 books about women in Alaska, all worth a read, all available online somewhere, and I hope to do this sort of that I recommend 3 books of some category in the future. I have a few topics lined up, and I'm hoping that this is useful to people. And so, seems like a 1,000-word script comes out to be 20 minutes. It's maybe a little longer than I'd hoped. I'll keep that in mind when I write future scripts. So thank you for letting me talk about books that I've enjoyed, books that I would read again, and I hope to see you next time. Take care.